Hello, Smart Money Tree Podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm. I'll be your host, and today I'm joined with Doug Hagren. Hey, Doug.
Hey there, Kirk. Happy Labor Day weekend to you and everybody else. And, I just can't get enough of you. I think this is the fourth time we've chatted this week. It's awesome. We got lots of so much to talk about that we've been able to fill hours and hours of space. And now we've got more.
It's a whole lot of Doug. I was just listening to the Rolling Stones. A whole lot of love. It's a whole lot of Doug.
Well, that's a blessing or a curse, depending on who's listening. So
yeah, I'm in a spicy mood. I just got off a workout and I just got an offer on a house accepted. So, those of you who were listening a month ago, we put another offer and we had to back out because the seller tried to scam us. They lied through their teeth. I think this one will be fine, but we'll be this weekend going to go do an inspection and fingers crossed it's going to go through because I'm ready to go. So I'm in a good mood, hopefully great mood. We'll have a better backdrop here in the future for the videos. We got a really good office there with some bookcases. It'd be pretty cool. So I'm in a good mood. We'll let everybody know what happens when it happens, but I think this is the winner. My second choice is actually phenomenal. Doug will like this. It backs up to a mass conservation property. It's like huge thing which you can go hunting on. Now, as I've told people I don't hunt, but my son wants to. So I was like, this would be really cool. And you walk around, it's like acres and acres of land and woods and lakes and cool stuff. And it's basically mine. I don't have to pay for it because I can just walk around it. Anyway, it was kind of cool. But this is better. Maybe not for Doug, but it's better for me. So anyway, so we'll get cracking here in the interest of the weekend. We're doing a little early. We had a scheduling snafu for tomorrow, so we held it early. So I see exactly 0 people who are expecting us to go because we scheduled this 5 minutes before it started. So I think the listeners will be fine, but those who are listening live, sorry, we'll get you next time. Anyway, so let's dive into some stuff. I'm in a good mood, but I do want to get into some stuff that we talked about a little bit last week. The title of this episode, because I was a nitwit and forgot to duplicate the copyright, is called "Copy of Government Data is Fake News." So the point of this is this, and I want to kind of dive into this a little bit. Government data is basically a guess. I know it's a shock to all of you. The government is basically guessing on government data. Hear me out. Okay. This is a trade secret that no one will ever admit in public, because then it basically admits the fact that they're making an educated guess. They're basically gambling on what the number is. Now, I shared this last time. Ed Kirshner, the former CIO of PaineWebber, used to do a talk on this. And he'd have this talk and he'd have this grid of, let's say, CPI, and then it would have each quarter, and then it would have revisions, first, second, third, through like 20th revisions. And as you go through, you can see there's no pattern, none. The first shot is 2.2. The next one is 1. The one after that's 5. The one after that's -4. Like no rhyme or reason, all over the place. Now, I actually was listening to a podcast where a guy I follow, I won't mention his name, but he's a guy I follow. He's very good with government data. And so I was listening to him, and he actually had some stats because he actually studied this more than I did, and I put a lot of time in. He said basically the initial data of the government is about 58% accurate. 58% accuracy on the first number coming out. It's basically a guess. It's a coin flip. It's a coin flip guess. And he said by the third revision, it's about 94% accurate. So by the third revision, it's generally around the same. Now, in my opinion, that depends on the government data. Some government data bounces around a lot more than that, as I've seen. Inflation, GDP tends to be more or less directionally accurate, but inflation, all over the place. So if you think about it, here's basically what happens, and I'm just gonna like walk you through it so you don't think I'm just throwing crap at politicians like we generally do here. So when the government tries to get data, Many times what it's doing is it's giving a survey. It's a survey for feedback from business owners or whoever, right? Whoever they're trying to get the data from, they're sending out a survey and said, please send the information back. Well, a lot of people don't send it back. A lot of people are late. They're just giving you their best guess. Um, and so initially, you're getting data that's crap. It's basically a coin flip. So if that's the case, why are we trying to jam a 50% success rate into quarterly numbers? They're doing revisions like a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters later. Why not just wait until you're 90% accurate before you start sending it out? Why are you doing it when it's 50, 60%? That's moronic. Let's be honest. Not everybody listening to the show is a numbers person, but I think we can all agree that 50% is bad statistics, unless you're flipping coins, which case you're spot on. But the government is basically flipping a coin. Now, what I've heard, and I definitely won't mention names for this, but from what I've heard from people I know that are in government, as well as friends of mine who also know other people in government, they've all said the same thing. Basically, what happens is the bean counters are sitting there coming up with numbers, and the head bean counter comes in and says it's 2.2. I don't know how they come up with a number. I don't know if the president says this is what it is, or the Fed, some people at the Fed, or if they rub a leprechaun's butt and it comes up with that number. I really have no idea, but basically that's what I've been told happens. Is the head comes in and said, "Here's the number," and everyone just says, "Okay," and they keep doing their work because later they can revise it. So what that leads me to believe is, why the heck are we paying attention to numbers? It's like corporate earnings. I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but corporate earnings are managed. I remember starting to notice this with General Electric and Microsoft. It was like magic. Every quarter, like magic, Jack Welch hit his number. Wow. Not only did he hit his number, he exceeded it by 10% every quarter, like magic. And Microsoft did the same thing. Now, Microsoft is going a lot more than 15% or whatever number they were putting up. They were going like 30%, but they kept saying 15, 15, 15. So they managed it. Now, I've also heard from a lot of CFOs I've spoken over the years that it's very easy to manage your earnings. And what tends to happen, I don't know if you guys have all noticed this, but every once in a while there's a bad quarter. Bad April. Market goes down 20%, 30%. Oh my God, everything's terrible. Companies come out. Oh my God, our earnings are going to be terrible. The tariffs are going to kill us. Blah, 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 blah. Let's lower earnings by 50%. Next quarter comes out. Oh, we beat earnings. Oh yeah, you took the bar, the high bar, and you put it on the ground. And you stepped over it and you said, "Wow, look at me! I'm a superhero." That's basically what happens. So what happens is they manage their earnings, and every once in a while, bad stuff comes out. Everyone dumps all their bad stuff into that quarter. Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. They lower the bar, they exceed the bar, and then they move forward. So it allows them to manage it in a smooth way. Now, I've seen this for over 25 years. It may have been prior to that, but I was paying attention for the last 25 years in college, obviously paying attention to other things. But so that is generally from anecdotal evidence. And I'm not saying this like definitive proof, but I know enough people, I've talked to enough people over the years that know what's going on. This is how it works. So all that being said, the fact that you know this, what does that mean for you? Nothing, because government data means nothing to you. So what you should be doing is you should be looking at directional trends. Directionally, where are things going? Should you freak out if a company has bad earnings? Why are the earnings bad? Because of the tariffs? All right, well, then you focus on the tariffs. So far, the tariffs haven't been a problem, as Doug and I have said in this show. They're probably not going to be a problem, and if they are, it's a one-time problem. Then after that, it'll be fine. Well, we're still working on the tariffs, and things are moving ahead somewhat smoothly. somewhat smoothly. They're being worked on, but it's not catastrophe like everyone thought. It will cause a little bit of inflation, but it's not as bad as people thought. So, like we said in the show, let's wait and see what happens. I'm reserving my judgment. So far, I'm still reserving my judgment. It could bite us in the butt, but I haven't seen it yet. So the big question is, what's going on? Is it going to be bad? Everyone says there's going to be a recession. We haven't seen it. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see a recession. I'm skeptical. I think we probably will, but I thought that 2 years ago when it was managed then, it's being managed now. So maybe we never see a recession ever again. I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but I'm also somewhat serious. Maybe we never see a recession again. Does it matter? It's an honest question you have to ask yourself. Does a recession matter? No. What matters? Corporate earnings. Are they increasing? Yes. They're doing well. Who cares if there's a recession? I mean, you do if you can't pay your bills. But if you're investing, which is why we're all here, does it matter? No. What matters is what's the impact on the companies you're investing in? Are they going to be impacted by a potential recession? If it's a problem, then you should be careful. But otherwise, just make sure they're strong and they can knuckle through a quarter or two recession, and we'll be back on the roll. So I haven't seen anything that's disturbing. Well, let me rephrase that. I've seen a lot of things that are disturbing, but nothing imminent, nothing around the corner that I've seen. It could be. We could decide to. I won't get into international politics, but certain countries could rope us into another international affair. Those countries won't be named, but because I value my life. But if we get pulled in another international affair, all bets are off. But withstanding that, Trump seems to want to have global peace, and kudos to him for that, because that's what I want. So as long as we're on path for that, I think we'll be fine. But we'll see. So anyway, we'll get into some of the data in a minute, but I wanted to just kind of share that framework, because I think a lot of people get caught up in the data. They get caught up in the nitpicky stuff that frankly don't matter as much as you think they should. And when I say should, we all think they should happen in a certain way, but it doesn't mean they do. This is a public service announcement. Have you ever played the lottery? My state advertises that you can't win if you don't play. What they don't tell you is that the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math. How many lottery winners have you met? Probably none. If you don't like your chances of winning the state lottery, you're definitely not going to like the chances of winning the inflationary lottery. The inflationary lottery? That's right. Your chances to win the state lottery might be 1 million to 1. But you're guaranteed to win the inflation lottery because it affects everyone. And the prizes stink. But here's what you're going to win. Higher prices at the store, shrinkflation in your packaged goods. Higher heating prices to heat your home. Who doesn't want to win that lottery? Much like the government, I feel bad that your costs are rising. So I want to help you out by giving you some free money. It's not a lot. It's only 1 million Zim dollars, but it's something. Well, you can't buy anything with it, but it does look good as wallpaper. And if you live in Europe, you might even be able to use it to heat your home this winter. If the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math, then inflation is a tax on people who are bad at economics. I want my listeners to be better at economics. So I'm giving my loyal listeners free money. Go to www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. Follow the instructions to get your free money today. I have a large audience and a limited number of these currencies. So let's make sure we get yours before we run out. Go to www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. Follow the instructions and get your free money today. Real quick, I'm going to share these, and then we're going to move over to Doug and let him pontificate on stuff that he's smarter than me on. So, Consumer Price Index. These are the last 10 years or so, and it shows different items, and it just kind of shows how they operate. Non-seasonally adjusted. I want to point that out. Seasonal adjustments are another way statisticians like to pump the brakes when they decide to, or they decide to fluff up the numbers. So I don't like seasonally adjusted. I like seeing the real thing. So as you can see, there are many forms of inflation. but they're all kind of around the same. If you look at all items, it's like 2.7. If you're looking at core, it's like 1.2. If you're looking at the highest super core services 3.6. So just something to keep in mind. We also have. I wish I'd put all these together, but I didn't. We have the monthly change. These are the breakouts of what's doing what. Medical care services. And it shows the previous month in the red dots. The medical care services going up, transportation services going up, household furnishing supplies is going down but still high, trash collection, blah blah blah, recreational commodities. So there's a bunch of things high. The things that are low: education and communication commodities. Don't know what that is. Energy. Oh, okay. So energy, education, communication, and commodities. All of those have declined, which is interesting because commodities have been a little elevated and have been doing well, especially precious metals. They've been going higher, so I expect that to turn around at some point. But just things to keep in mind, when you're looking at these numbers. We all know what the inflation is because we all fill our cart every week with food, and we know where the inflation's going. But here's another chart from Fred, St. Louis Fed, for those of you who don't know that. So this is inflation up and down over the last 35 years, looks like. So, it's just something to keep in mind. We're at 3% right now. It's obviously we all think it's higher than it's showing, but it's like I said, something to keep in mind. And then, we won't go through the rest. I'll give it over to Doug, and we can go through other stuff. But so what do you want? What do you want to go with this, Doug? Government data. We're putting people to sleep. So where should we go?
Well. Since we're talking about government data, and we'll kind of keep it just a little bit more on that track, but less maybe sleepy. So I did post this. Employment gains are now just 35,000 jobs per month in the last 3 months. A year ago, those employment gains were 123,000 jobs per month. Now, again, what does that mean? Because a year ago, I specifically remember a conversation with you, Kirk, about how those numbers were huge and then got revised several months later. So I'm not really sure how that necessarily, correlates to the reality of the real jobs of the time. But entry-level job listings are shown as being down 15%. Applications are up 30%. 41% of 2024 grads are underemployed and 58% are still job hunting. I can tell you that my daughter just got her nursing assistant degree, and she's 16 years old. But good for her. She's kind of working ahead, and she's put some applications out there. And even in the nursing world, it seems to be a very slow response rate, which is typically an area where they consistently needed more people in terms of looking at and interviewing new individuals to come in. We have, we also, talking about the data kind of on the other side, there's been the predictions about what do we expect in terms of rate cuts. I think we were talking a couple weeks ago, and we've been through this before, Kirk. You and I are not new to this. We're not new to talking about this, about how these predictions tend to kind of flow like the tides in the morning, in, out. Well, there is, they have now moved the odds of a September rate cut, which were 99-ish% a couple weeks ago, have now moved to 75%. There was a period not that long ago when when the markets were betting on 6 cuts to happen, and that was back February 2024. We got that hot CPI report on September 11th. If we get a hot CPI report on September 11th, the question remains, what's going to happen? Will there be cutting of rates? So we start to see, again, these predictions markets, they're all over the place. There's absolutely, there is absolutely no consistency on them. You look out, it's meaningless. The data is consistently moving. It's consistently flawed, and it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. But you talked about the recession. What does that mean? Well, it really depends on you made some points about, are people going to be employed? Are we feeling things? Retail, food service, there's some new data coming out. Retail sales, food service, and drinking places, monthly percent change, 3-month moving average. the last time we saw it negative was February of this year. And then it spiked up to kind of around anywhere from 0.4 to over 1% change. Absolutely plummeted down to about zero in a 1 month period between June and July. I haven't, obviously we don't have August numbers yet. Those are going to come out. Prior to that, I said February was negative, and then prior to that, it was March of 2024. So we are kind of, we generally, I mean, from that, previously we were kind of seeing negative, kind of coming out of the winter months, but now to see it in July, just to give some context. July of last year, it was up about 0.5, a little under 0.5%. July of 2023, it was up almost 1%. So this is this doesn't seem to be tracking the trends that were in place. From that, from an aspect of kind of what's going on. Are we eating out less? Or are consumers tightening up? You have a chart that you found that I think is interesting. We've talked about this before. Delinquencies on the rise, and they've spiked up. Now this data is a couple quarters behind, but we had actually seen a downtrend of delinquencies going into from basically for the most part since 2011. There had been a little bit of a rise, obviously 2020, 2021 with COVID. We had definitely seen a consistent downtrend of delinquencies of 90 days plus from around 2011 down to around 2018. It came back up in COVID. Again, that's an anomaly. It came back down to 2022. Over the last 2 years, it has spiked up to 12%. If we go back to 2009, 2010, those delinquencies were at about 12% then. So we're back to where we were coming out of the Great Recession. The one that it's really not a surprise to me is student loans. They were on a pause since COVID. And as I said about a year ago, when they were talking about ending this, that we would start to see a rise in delinquencies there, it spiked up from almost zero. I mean, it's hard to be delinquent if nobody's demanding it. Now we had seen about 5% in 2003 that kind of went up to an average of around 11% on student loans that was consistent from about 2013 to 2020. And then boom, with removing that as a mandatory payment, it plummeted down to, from 11% down to zero over 2 year period. It has spiked all the way up to its long-term average, about 10% is just under. So again, the pain was taken away, temporarily paused, but not removed. We've still seen home equity revolving down, mortgage down, no surprise. Interest rates being super low. Auto loans have held pretty consistent. But the fact that we're Kirk, I got to ask you, you're buying a home, right? If you got into financial duress, what's the last payment you're going to skip?
The home.
The home.
Got to live somewhere.
Absolutely. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing very low delinquency rates on home equity and mortgage, because people are going to keep paying those so they have shelter over their heads. But guess what? It is a sign. What's the first thing you're not going to pay? Student loan. Can't take anything from you. It's not collateralized. The credit card. It's not collateralized. The auto loan. Hey, if you've got a job, yeah, you can take the bus if you live inner city. The bus doesn't come to my house. So guess what else I need to have? I've got to have a car. So the fact that we're not seeing spikes on mortgages and auto loans, it's not really a surprise to me. These are critical and they're collateralized debt. The non-collateralized debt spiking up tells me that we definitely are starting to see consumers that are feeling the pressure. We've talked about that. And we start the consumer sentiment, the percentage who expect us to see a change in unemployment in the next year. We've seen that spike from around 30% of people down to almost 70% of people now are feeling that pessimism. And that's a rise of almost 40% in a 1 year period. The last time we were that pessimistic, 2008. And the last time before that was 2000. So that tends to coincide with times in which unemployment was more challenged. And by the way, speaking of the auto loans, you have another really good chart there. And this, I've talked about this, auto loans are getting longer and longer. It used to be, okay, do you want a 3-year loan, 4-year loan, 5-year loan? Now it's becoming increasingly common to have a 5, 6, or 7-year loan. Now, I want to make a little bit of context on this. I don't personally have a problem with that, actually. But that depends on the situation. I am a believer that if you're going to give me the same terms, okay, like Kirk, if you say to me, interest rates comparable, I mean, maybe it's, this comes back to mortgages. If you give me a 15 or a 30 and you tell me I'm going to get a little discount on a 15, that doesn't mean much to me, because if it's close enough to the 30, I would rather have the control and flexibility of a 30. Everybody says, oh, if I wait 30, I'm going to pay so much more interest. Yeah, that's true. But nobody's telling you have to pay it in 30. It's not necessarily a bad idea to pay in 30, but you can pay a 30-year home off in 15. And you can really ultimately, with the difference in payment and putting that payment aside somewhere else, you could build up money elsewhere and actually end up in a situation where you could possibly pay off your home in 14 years, 13 years, better than a 15-year mortgage. It'd be better off. Same thing with an auto loan. Anytime you're going to give me the flexibility of taking a loan and spreading it out longer, most variables being equal, works for me. Because here's the reality is we've got cash flow is king. Okay. So if I've got $30,000 I owe and I can stretch that over 3 years or I can stretch it over 7, I'll take the 7 if variables are comparable, because I could still pay it in 3. What it's about is control of my money. Now, if we're talking that, like I said, this is in context, because this is assuming you could pay the 3-year mortgage or the 3-year car loan. Then give me the 7, I can pay it off. If you can't afford a 3-year car loan or a 4-year car loan, and you're picking a 7-year car loan because it's the only payment you can afford, completely different philosophy. Okay. Now you are locking yourself into slave to the lender, as a certain talking head would say, to where you don't have that flexibility. It's already maxing you out on cash flow. A 3-year car payment, if you can pay it, unless if we take a 7-year car payment, things being very real, let's just say it's a $400 a month for a 7-year car payment. It's $1,000 for a 3-year. Okay, you're locked into $1,000 no matter what. There's no flexibility. On the 7, you have the minimum to do $400. You could still choose to do $1,000. If you can afford that, that's a different story. That's an elective choice to stretch it and have control. But here's the underlying thing that's going on in most of these charts, is that the reality is that most of the people are taking on those car loans now, are taking them on because at the 7-year, because it is the minimum they can afford. And that's because interest rates on car loans have gone through the roof. The prices of cars have gone through the roof. It's the same issue that we're seeing on the mortgage side of things, Kirk, where what are people doing? They're starting to come out with creative loans that go past 30 years now. Why? Because housing prices are way up here. Interest rates are way up here. You and I have shown ad nauseum the number of charts that show what that takes and the affordability. And ultimately, people are getting into more creative loans that are not in their advantage in order to try to afford it and get in. And there's no wiggle room whatsoever if something goes wrong. And so if we start to see credit cards and other things going up, this is a scary scenario at the bottom of the income curve.
So it's a great point, Doug, and I'll actually give some context to this, because I came across this recently. I bought a new car because I shared it in the show. My car was from 2011, and some knucklehead hit me from the behind, and my car, in insurance terms, is worth $1,600, even though it was perfectly fine. It was a Honda Pilot. I could get another 100,000 miles, look good, no issues. And because it was old, insurance company totaled it, even though I literally could have slapped some paint on it and kept driving, but I was like, whatever. And so what was interesting was I went and bought a used car. That car actually I bought was a new car, the 2011, when I bought it, because new cars were actually cheaper than used cars at the time, because it was a Fukushima incident, and it was Honda, so it was anyway. So
the car was glowing.
I got a 2-year-old car, 2 or 3. It was a 3-year-old car. It was a 22. Great, it was a good deal, like what I got, and so they go to finance it, and I'm looking at it, and it was like, all right, you could pay it 3, 5, or 7 years, and 3 years, I forget the rates, but I'm just going to make these up off the top of my head. Like 3 years is like 5.5, 5 is like 6, and 7 is 6. And I was like, give me the 7. Like, I want flexibility. I want, so the way I've kind of always looked at debt is, have the best flexibility possible. So when I bought my condo years and years ago, I got the interest only loan, which is, I think for 10 years it couldn't go above a certain amount, and for that time it was perfect because it was basically zero. And I got it, and so what I did was there were great low rates, and I knew it would eventually go up, but I figured rates would be low because if you have a recession, they're going to stay low anyway. And so what I did was I got the lowest rate, and then I kept pumping in principal every month. So I paid it like it was a 30-year, but I had the flexibility. So if I was short, I had to pay taxes or something, I could just pay the interest only, and I had the flexibility to do that. And anytime I've ever done loans, I've always tried to have the most flexibility possible. Like in the 5 to 7 year, there was no disadvantage to going 7 years. So I added extra bucks onto the 7, so it's paid down like a 5. But if it needed, and frankly, it's not that much, and maybe an extra $100 or something. But like, if for whatever reason I got tight or needed to do something, I have the option. Now the other thing is I could always just pay it off when I felt like it. So the reason I did this is when I bought the car, I knew I was looking for a house, and when you're looking for a house, what's the one thing to look at? Monthly payments. What are your monthly payments? And not
cash flows everything.
Yeah, not Netflix, but like credit cards, car loans, education loans. What are you paying every month? And they deduct that off what you can pay the mortgage. So I knew I wanted to have the most flexibility possible. So what did I do? I said, all right, I want the lowest payment possible. So that's what shows up on the credit report. So then when I'm actually going to get the house, they're like, oh, it's only $500 a month when I'm actually paying $750, but they don't know that. So, it's $500 a month. Great. Okay. It's fine. He won't want to impact it. So Doug and I have been around long enough where we know how the system works and we know how to manage things appropriately. But I just mentioned this because what Doug said is 100% correct. However, if you have the stomach for it and you have the strategery for it, it's not a bad idea to have the flexibility, but pay like the better deal, as long as all else is equal. Now, if we're talking a 15 versus a 30 year, well, that's probably a % difference, and that's not going to be the same. But if you have enough down where the bank is safe enough, they will give you the lowest rate possible. And so you have to think about, like, what am I trying to accomplish? I know interest rates are going to drop. Like, they're already dropping for mortgage rates because Trump said they're going to drop, so they're going to drop. I don't think Jay Powell wants to be a whipping boy is more than he is. So if you think about where things are going, eventually rates are going to keep going lower at some point, and I'll just refinance lower. And if they get skyrocketed, whatever, I'll just keep it. But I think the thing to think about is you have to think of this like 3D chess. You can't just think about like what's the rate. You have to think about, all right, what in the next few years, how's this going to impact me? How are my other debt loads going to impact me? Because when you think about things like college or credit cards or if you look at the government, we talked about this in the show. There was a rumor, which actually has been upended by Bessett. The rumor initially, the Mar-a-Lago Accord, was they would try to get government debt out 100 years at like really low rates, and then they basically punt on inflation and interest. So that would have been a good deal. Instead, what they did was they put together stable coins, and they're going to pump a bunch of treasuries into stable coins, and that's going to be interesting. So you have to really think these things through. I can tell you from going in the process of buying a home, if anyone wants to know where the top of the market is, it's now. It'll be in a month when I close. That'll be the top of the market. I bought my condo in 2006. and 2005 I think was the peak. So I bought my condo in 2006. So I'm buying a house now. So it's inevitably going to be the peak, which Doug and I have been talking about for the last 2 years, and now I think it's happening everywhere. But Massachusetts is dropping in rents and prices. Massachusetts will probably stick, but I'm going to stay for the next 10, 20 years. So I really don't give two poops. So whatever we talk about in the show, your home is a personal expense. It is not an investment. No, I don't want to lose money, but I don't expect to sell anytime soon. And frankly, I got to live somewhere. So it's not, I don't look at it that way. And frankly, if I move and it costs me some bucks, well, it's going to cost me to live somewhere. So, it's a good deal. I'll be here for a long time. But the thing is, when you're looking at a house, if you're, and to be fair, the people who own the house that selling it to me, they were going to do the same thing, but then their kid had to move to a different school, so they had to move towns, and that's why they're selling. So I empathize with them because we got kids with learning stuff too. So it's challenging. You don't always know what's going to happen, but I think if you can look beyond the price and just say, "Hey, I'm living here for the next 10 or 20 years," it's not going to really matter. Everyone wants a good deal, but as long as you look at it as not an investment, it's a personal expense, then it is what it is. It's basically a monthly payment. But it is nice to have the flexibility so that you can pay it down. Now, I will say another thing, because as I go through this process, I'm learning more and more each day, because you just learn stuff by asking good questions. One of the things I learned, so let's say I had a $100,000 mortgage, and the property's worth, let's say, I don't know, 200 to make the numbers easy. And I decide, at the end of the year, let's say I get a bonus. A lot of people get bonuses. Let's say I get a bonus, and I want to take 50,000 and put that into the principal. Apparently, what banks will do, if you put enough in, where you're like overly, if you put way more equity than you had planned, they will recast the mortgage. I think they called it recasting, but they'll recast the mortgage. So you're not refinancing it. You're just recasting it. So instead of $100,000 over 30 years, it'll be $50,000 over 30 years, or 29 and a half years. So your monthly payments will lower. If you could do it, you don't want to do it all the time, but if you happen to put in big checks and you're like, you know what, I just added a chunk, can we recast this? And your monthly payments will drop. So not a bad idea. However, if you think about mortgages, you're either lowering your payments if you're recasting, which, like I said, not all banks will probably do this, or you're shortening the maturity. So two things happen. Let's say you put an extra $100 into a $200 a month mortgage. You put an extra $100 in, effectively you're shortening the time that you owe. So the 30 years, and these numbers aren't the way it is, but I'm just making them up for this, just so you don't think it's one third. Let's say you have a 30-year mortgage, it's 200 a month. You're putting an extra 100, so it's 300 a month. You're shortening your mortgage by 10 years. So now it's due in 20 years, which is good, right? That's if you do it normally. It shrinks the maturity of the mortgage. So I don't even know if banks will do this, but this is what I would want, where you put an extra principal and it lessens the payment. And then you can accelerate your payments, because then you're putting more and more and you're compounding. Banks don't do it that way. But if you recast and you do enough, I think you probably could, just not as easily. One other thing that can be done, I will point out, because I learned this years ago, is that there's you have to want to do this. And I'll just tell you up front, it's a little more work than most people are accustomed to. But here's a strategy you can do. Okay. Let's say you have a $100,000 mortgage. Okay. You get it. It's the place is worth $120,000, and or $80,000 mortgage. The place is worth 100. Okay. So you get an 80-20. And then you make your payments every month. Let's call it $100 every month. Now, what you can do is you can get a home equity line. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a line of credit based on the equity of your home. So you can get a home equity line for, let's say, $20,000. Now, what you can do is you borrow $20,000 on the home equity line and use that to pay down the mortgage. Okay. Now you've got, and I'm, like I said, making these numbers up, but you have $20,000 out. Well, what can you do? You've got an extra payment, obviously. Well, what you can do is when you get paid, that payment goes directly into the home equity line. So you get paid, let's say you get, whatever, $5,000 a month. That 5,000 goes to the home equity line. Well, now the home equity line is only 15. So your payments are less, but you're paying out of the home equity line every month. So it's a cash flow game, but basically because the cash is not it's not sitting in your bank account, it's sitting in the home equity line. So you're paying less in interest. So you have to, if you guys are interested, just shoot me an email, I'll explain it but better. But basically what it is you're hijacking the financial system. You're financially engineering your mortgage. So you're paying less in interest, you're shortening the mortgage, and it actually helps you pay, I would say, 20 to 30% quicker because of this. Because the cash, instead of sitting in your bank earning zero, it's sitting in your home equity line, not paying out interest, which you would have paid anyway in a mortgage. So you're effectively shortening the cycle and shortening the amount of interest you pay. Over time, that compounds and it shortens the mortgage. I know it's a complicated topic, but I always found it fascinating. It's not for everybody. You have to really run the numbers, but you can look it up online. There are people who do it. It's big in Australia. There's like a multi-level marketing company in Australia that pitches this. That's how I initially found it. And of course, like, why do I need to sign up? You just shared with me all how it works. But apparently it's big in Australia. So anyway, there's a lot of things you can do with the financing, but I want to share two more things and let Doug wrap it up. So I saw a few charts. One of them was kind of interesting. I'm going to share this. State of global fertility. I know we're kind of pivoting hard on the topic. Good segue. But I found it interesting. So if you look globally, all of kind of the developed countries, more or less, are between 1 and 1.9% fertility rate. And that is below the replacement rate. So it needs to be 2.1, I believe, in order to break even. Because, of course, there's deaths and whatever. So I think if a country has 2.1, then they're not shrinking, right? They're even at 2.1. Anything below 2.1, they're actually technically shrinking. So at one point, China was like 1 because they only have one child policy. So it was probably below 1. But I think they've changed that. But if you look at the US, Canada, most of South America, Russia, all of Europe, some parts of Asia, China, Australia, New Zealand, it's pretty much 1 to 1.9. Then if you look at places like Mongolia, Northern Africa, South Africa, certain parts of South and Central America, you're looking at 2 to 2.9. And then if you look at like the meat of Africa, like the central part of Africa, it's 4 or higher. Now, it's interesting because if you want to see where the growth is demographically, this is where the growth is, right? There are only a handful of spots with below 1, and they're really small, so I can't see them. But they look like certain Chinese cities or certain parts of the Caribbean. But effectively, it's something to keep in mind because everyone's worried about the demographics and the shrinking demographics, and it's the same thing everywhere. And I think people have to come to terms with the fact that inflation, growth through inflation and financial engineering is going to come back and bite us in the butt someday. So that was eye-opening to me, which is why I want to share it. And the other two, here we go. Here's another one I want to share, the earnings revisions, just because it's interesting. You see earnings revisions down and up. And there's certainly a lot of this is more data. I'm not going to stick on this because it's complicated, but just something to keep in mind. There's a lot of earnings revisions in U.S. companies. And then let's see. Here we go. So I wanted to share this too. So I saw this, and it was in regards to trends. So this was, I forget who this put out. There wasn't a link, so I would attribute it otherwise. But basically, the big trends that in portfolio managers are focused on is protectionism, which we've known about for a while. We call that populism in many ways. Protectionism, where people are protecting against other countries with global trade, which has always been seen as not a positive for global trade, but that's it doesn't seem to be a problem at the moment. But certainly, U.S. and China disentangling is in many ways wise. Long term, there may be more conflicts, but at the moment, it seems like everyone agrees it's probably a good idea because we can't be friends. Tensions are escalating geopolitically, of course. We know that. U.S. and China, Middle East, Ukraine, the powers that be seem to want war, and no one else does. The plebs like Doug and I and everyone listening, we don't want war, but the warmongers do, and they want to change the world, and they're the ones with the power, unfortunately. So I think that's a little bit unfortunate. Havens reshuffling, so nations increasingly diversifying their reserves away from the U.S. That's something that's been going on for the last 2 years, or actually longer, but especially when the agreement we had with Saudi Arabia ended. We had a 50-year agreement where we would basically defend them and sell them arms, and they would keep oil prices stable. And that ended, I think, 2 years ago in Biden's administration. It was not re-signed, which is fine. I don't see a reason why they would re-sign it, but it's still something to keep in mind that there's a lot of shuffling going around. The U.S. is losing its global reserve currency status slowly, and we'll continue to lose it slowly because there's no reason for us to keep it. But that's important because there's people are accustomed to certain things, and now they need to reshuffle the deck a little bit to figure out where else things need to be. Policy being rewritten. I mean, all the old playbooks are being thrown out. Trump is lighting everything on fire, good and bad. I like a lot of the stuff he's doing, not all of it. Keep in mind, there's a lot of things I don't like, but there's a lot of stuff he's doing that I do like, and I think what I do like is the fact that politicians tend to be non-confrontational and they tend to be cowards. They just basically do what people want and what makes them happy, which is rarely the right thing to do. There's no leadership. So, we've always done this, so let's keep doing it this way. Well, it doesn't work. Well, yeah, I can make an argument it works. Yeah, but it hasn't worked yet. Well, maybe it will. Like this shenanigans that go on with the academics and the talking heads and the politicians, it just leads to bad outcomes. So the fact that policy is being rewritten is good. It's not all going to be good, but I think in general, directionally, it's good that people are at least open to changing things. And lastly, the shocks are amplifying, like COVID. The point was basically that COVID exposed the fragility of hyper optimization. Which we talked about a lot in the show, right? Hyper optimization of supply lines and everything. And then some little thing came in and broke it. And that's going to happen in many different areas. All of our culture and society is going to be rewritten over the next 10 years because of all the trends. AI, you've got technology, you've got the U.S. global political situation. You've got new energy. You've got tons of stuff. I mean, if Doug and I created free energy tomorrow, the whole world, the economy would crash. You might think it's great, and it would be, but not immediately. Immediately, it would be a disaster because no one's expecting that. It's not that it's bad. It's just no one's expecting it. And people need time to adjust to things. So that's why when Trump said, we're going to have 300% tariffs on China, everyone flipped out. Markets went down 20%. Said, just kidding. Taco trade. Trump always chickens out. That's the taco trade. So when people they see things they're not accustomed to, people freak out. So there will be some subtle shifts and there'll be some major shifts, but overall, I think directionally we're going in the right direction. I hope we don't have any black swans. That's my thing. So Doug, final thoughts and maybe take us home.
Yeah, well, a couple things. You talked about COVID. I just saw some today. COVID spiking again. Oh well, going into the season. Now here we are. So the political, let the political debate on that begin.
Do you want to begin it now, Doug, or do you want to go get your tinfoil hat, or should
I haven't made one, Kirk. I'm not there yet. Where I'm okay with them reading my brain at this point, but I'm starting to come around on probably needing to build my my reflective. Yeah, exactly. Oh God, I hope
I
you
need
didn't
all my
just use
masks.
those. Just so
You
everyone
can't hear
knows,
me.
Kirk
I'm wearing a mask.
worked. We picked the time to do this today
By the
based
way,
on
those
Kirk getting a
socks, bad
workout. I think
mask.
those are the socks he just finished wearing. Um, what's her name? Catherine McGuire. Catherine McGuire. Yeah, exactly. But we talked about I want to go back because a couple of things you said there. We actually talked about the concerns. I mentioned earlier, 70% are worried a little bit about what's going to happen with jobs. There's actually some data that came out for ages 60 to 65 in 2022 who experienced a layoff the prior 10 years. This is from the Center of Retirement Research at Boston College, right there in your backyard, using health and retirement study from 2012 to 2022. What it showed is that a late career layoff, what it looks like in America, many are taking longer to find new jobs. Others retire earlier than planned. Among those ages 50 to 65, 14% were laid off once, 4% were laid off more than once, and amongst those laid off at least once between ages of 50 and 65, 24% did not find a new job. So if we're, and this was published again, recently in the Wall Street Journal as well. So, it is harder to find work as you get older. I think there's more people that are concerned about it. And then, we've talked about AI. That is certainly going to lead to, we saw this after the Great Recession. Certain jobs didn't come back. With AI, as I've talked to attorneys, I've talked to software engineers. I just talked to someone who works at Cisco recently, I believe listens to the show. There's definitely concerns around, the roles that they have or their teams having becoming obsolete, more obsolete in an environment of AI and ultimately whether or not that's, there's going to be, we heard about Microsoft and all of their layoffs. If there's going to be more layoffs and those people are going to be able to come back, and that leads to greater concerns, which going back to our conversation before, you talked about some ways with the mortgage, all ties in. I've got some other philosophies around, paying on the mortgage and or debt. Yes, you can, if there's ways to expedite paying off that mortgage. I tend to be a bigger fan of not necessarily putting more towards the mortgage, because if they give money to the bank, there's only two ways I'm going to get that back. And they both require permission. The first is I have to have someone who's going to sell it. So congrats, Kirk. You just gave permission for someone who owns a home to get out of their, to get their equity. Hey, thank you.
It's Freudian slip to get out of their, and then
yeah, to get out of their home,
get out of their bum house,
to get out of their bum house. They
Sell
found
to
a
me.
sucker, thankfully, so they got that permission. The other way that you're going to get your equity is to get permission from a bank, and that's going to be in the means of a loan. Home equity is only accessible based on permission, and we look at this as one of the greatest. It is, in fact, one of the greatest assets in America that Americans have. Trillions of dollars of home equity. But it's going to remain untapped for many. And we're just seeing absolutely plummeting, staggeringly low numbers of sales, back as bad as they were, in 2007, 2008, 2009. So if you're thinking that this equity is going to be usable to you by selling your house, depending on the market, you might find a buyer, and that's going to come back, but it's going to take time and patience. We're seeing right now 39 of the top 50 U.S. metros have seen month-over-month housing price declines for the first time in history. So part of it is going to be, can you find a sucker to buy your place, a Kirk? Or, what'd you say? Or secondarily, are you going to be emotionally or financially willing to give up some of your equity to find it? Because at some point, there's always going to be an equilibrium where you're going to find a buyer. But right now, we have the stubbornness of movement where buyers are not willing, either by emotion or affordability, to go after homes in general. And sellers are not willing to give up their 2, 3, 4% interest rates or their paid off equity. And they see this equity as what I have is what I have. The thing is, you got to remember, You didn't have that equity 10 years ago. If you're banking on that equity, you got to figure out how you're going to get it. And so, okay, maybe your equity is $800,000. How reliant are you on that 800, or do we need to get it back down to, are you willing to go to 700? This is where this is where things aren't moving right now. And that's where it's going to take a lot of patience. So long story short, too late. I think that ultimately, my opinion is, if you can find a way to take your money and not give it to the bank and put it in the side somewhere else where you have liquid accessibility to it, you can still use that money to pay off your home early if you want. But from a liquidity standpoint, there are there are 5 major risks in retirement: inflation, longevity, market volatility. We talk about all of these things. There is taxes, there is access to capital, and mortality. That's what falls. These are the big ones. And so access to capital is the number one cause of financial stress, and that's the problem. If your money's all tied up in equity, and you're trying to find money, you better hope someone's going to give you permission. By the way, I know we're a little bit over here, Kirk, and we're going to head to the weekend, but you mentioned tariffs earlier, so I just want to touch on this. How will tariffs hit key products? I put this on I posted this up there if you want to share it, from the Heinrich Foundation for Advancing Sustainable Global Trade. This is from the Yale Budget Lab. So base price before U.S. tariffs. Now, this is predictions, okay? Again, it's in a belief that the average effective U.S. tariff rate has surged to 18.6%, highest level since 1933. And so there is this expectation that you're going to see hikes for consumer prices, especially clothing, food, and cars. Now, there are people that believe that inflation is not going to occur, right? And so far, we haven't felt it. Companies are absorbing it. May or may not happen. We tend to be a little bit more bullish about the effect of it than others do. But let's say it does happen. There's where there is some agreement. Whatever it is in the short run seems to be something that will be much worse than the longer term. So even if we see it spike, what happens is the more expensive things become, the more possible you're going to see over time a substitution to cheaper resources. Now, the Trump administration would like to see that substitution mean going away from foreign goods and foreign crops and foreign production to U.S. production. And that's very possible that could happen. There's a reason we're not seeing Toyota too upset about tariffs. They already have factories here. And if we can get agreement of other companies to build here, the tariff becomes less of an issue. But there's other things that may come into that. So if this chart, and again, I don't know if you're showing it, you're not. Okay, so 41% short run expectation, the price of metals. By the way, metals tend to be in a lot of goods, so that's a trickle down effect. 36% effect on clothing, 31% crops, 26 electrical equipment. By the way, it has metal in it too. 17 in electronics, metal. 14% machinery, metal. 12% motor vehicles, metal. 11% manufacturers goods. You see a pattern here. Metal's going to trickle down. Interestingly enough, fishing fell at 10% there on the list. But what they see over the long run is that even a massive spike in metal, 41%, will settle in the long run over 10 years into 17. So it's going to come down. Clothing, they feel 36 to 18. Crops, 31 to 15. Electronic, 26 to 12, et cetera, et cetera. So again, even if those that are bearish on tariffs are right, over the long run, they tend to believe that from the data they're going to get absorbed in, and it won't be quite as drastic longer term as it is short term. But again, these are pretty heightened expectations for the impact that, as of now, companies have mostly absorbed. And again, as we know, Trump could make an agreement any day with any company to decide that or a country, to decide that there is no longer going to be that impact that we fear. All right, so I'm going to wrap out here. We head to Labor Day weekend. Here's the thing. College planning is wealth planning. And with the new big, beautiful bill reshaping loan limits, that's what we're talking about, debt, doing nothing is the fastest way to let Washington dictate your family's financial future. And I want to be brutally honest. Most financial advisors avoid college planning altogether. They don't study the strategies. They don't understand the formulas. And instead, they lazily default to half-truths. Just open a 529. Sound familiar? as if that's just going to solve it. It doesn't. In fact, it often backfires. And the worst part, they don't even know they're failing their clients. The financial industry is full of comforting half-truths about debt, about retirement, and about paying for school. They sound safe, but they drain wealth. And the families who follow them and end up sacrificing their future without even realizing it. Here's the truth. It's not about the pile. As we talked about today, cash flow, it's about the paycheck. The income you can reliably draw on without running out. And that's why this may be you, but we're hearing more individuals worth $3, even $5 million still worry. They have accumulation, but no income plan. And college is one of their biggest drains. Tuition today can quietly rob retirement income tomorrow. So ask yourself, are you going to let the system just slap you in a figure 4 leg lock, or will you climb the top rope first and dictate the match? If you've had any doubts whatsoever about whether or not you're getting the right advice on college, retirement income, or your overall wealth plan, listen to that little voice. That gut feeling is real. And if you've ever wondered why millionaires are afraid of running out of money, it's because they don't have the plan. Don't ignore it. Change it. Do it differently. Take control. Visit mergentadvisors.net. That's MERGENT. Or for college specifically, go to mergentcollegeadvisors.com, and let's make sure you're steering the outcome, not getting pinned by half-truths.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Doug. And I'm going to share one quick thing. I forgot to do it. I thought it'd be a good way to end the weekend. Actually, 2 charts. One was I just looked up Trump firing the head of labor statistics, and these are all the articles. And I just wanted to point this out. I forgot to do it earlier, but this is something I wanted to share, which is firing labor statistics head undermines trust in key data, undermines credibility. All these things are talking about how Trump is going to undermine credibility and trust.
What credibility?
That was Doug, you just ruined my joke, but that's okay. So the point being is, I didn't share it. There we go. So the point being is there is no credibility. Anyone who is credible in the financial industry knows that this stuff is not credible, and it's just a big game to pull one over on the plebs, on the everyday people, and I think that's in itself a problem. It really doesn't matter because these people are guessing, so one person versus the other, but at least we're talking about it. The other thing that I wanted to point out, I think Doug shared this with me, so I didn't want to go unanswered. But for every 8-ounce cup of milk consumed in childhood increases height by 0.39 centimeters on average. Anyone think this is a chart crime? I know I do, because I drank a gallon of milk every day in childhood. It wasn't a good thing, I can tell you. I'm allergic to milk. But I should be like 10 feet tall, but I'm not. So, you know what? I'm the same height as my dad. So this to me looks like a bogus chart crime. It's not really a chart, but I'm going to call it a chart. But data crime, because who the hell put this on? What was the focus group? 20 people? Like, come on.
Does it even say who get credit? I mean, it's ridiculous.
It says based on a 17-year longitudinal study. Blah, blah, I'm not getting into all the details because of bored people.
My father was 6. Listen, my father was 6'4". My mom was 5'4". I'm 5'9". We drank milk all the time.
Yeah, it's a bogus stuff.
If I hadn't drank milk, I'd be maybe 5'9".
Yeah, I would be like 1 foot tall if I didn't drink all that milk, apparently. So anyway, the funny thing about science is people who see these things who don't understand science get easily confused. Here's the thing about science. There is no truth. Like, everything can be debunked. It just takes one person to come over and debunk it, right? The gravity could be debunked tomorrow. Like, 1 + 1 = 2. In math, it can be. Like, it won't, but it can be, and you have to be open to that. But anytime you see a study, you always have to ask, like, what's the quality of the study? Who's getting paid? Is it the milk institution, that's paying? I mean, science now is not even science the way it used to be. So anyway, I'll wrap it up on that note. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.